The sky had not been blue for many years. It carried the color of metal dust and smoke, and sometimes faint lights flickered like ghosts of the old world. People had stopped asking when it would end. Most just wanted to survive another sunrise. Long before the fighting began, humans had dreamed of joining hands with life beyond Earth. Scientists believed that when the first signal came from the stars, it would bring friendship and knowledge. But the truth was different. When the visitors arrived, they didn't come as teachers. They came as rulers. The first contact had been peaceful on the surface. The alien ships hovered in orbit, shining with strange light, and their voices came through every broadcast channel, promising cooperation. In the beginning, there was excitement. World leaders gathered to talk. Cities lit up in celebration. People said it was the start of a new age, but the promises faded quickly. The visitors, who called themselves the Vaskra, demanded control over resources, water, minerals, and energy. They said Earth's systems were inefficient and that they could manage them better. When governments resisted, the first demonstrations began. Small energy bursts struck the oceans, creating massive storms. Satellites fell from the sky. Communication systems failed. At first, humans tried to reason with them. Then they tried to fight back. That was the beginning of the war. The fighting stretched across years, though few could remember exactly how it started anymore. Entire cities became silent zones. Nations that once argued about politics now fought side by side. The world had changed in ways no one imagined. In the middle of it all was a woman named Elena Vargas. She had once been a diplomat, trained to build bridges between divided nations. Her dream had always been peace. When the conflict began, she tried to negotiate with the Vaskra representatives. For months, she sat in cold rooms, talking through translators, searching for a way to stop the destruction. But she saw the truth too late. The Vaskra didn't want peace, they wanted control. Every meeting was just a delay tactic, giving them time to study humanity's defenses. When she realized this, it broke something inside her. The woman who once believed in words began working with the scientists and soldiers who built weapons instead. Elena wasn't proud of it, but she told herself there was no choice left. Peace is only real, she said one night, when both sides can survive it. Across the world, people like her were making the same hard choices. Engineers who once built passenger ships were now designing defense drones. Doctors who once healed the wounded now studied radiation treatment for battlefield exposure. Everyone was trying to hold the line in their own way. Commander Jonathan Red, leader of Earth's United Fleet, became a symbol of that fight. He wasn't known for his speeches, only his quiet resolve. When he walked into a room, people listened because they felt he carried the weight of millions on his shoulders. He and Elena often disagreed. She wanted to plan for peace even in the middle of war, while he focused on surviving the next attack, but deep down, they both knew they needed each other. The war reached its darkest point when the Vaskra destroyed Luna Base, Earth's main defense outpost on the moon. The explosion lit up the night sky like a second sun, and for weeks afterward, people couldn't sleep. Fear had become normal, but now it turned into despair. The news channels stopped counting casualties because numbers no longer made sense. And yet, even as hope faded, something began to change. The Vaskra had grown weaker too. Their ships no longer appeared as frequently. Their energy fields flickered in battles. Scientists noticed that their technology was starting to fail. Some believed it was because Earth's environment, its magnetism, its chemical balance was slowly wearing them down. In hidden laboratories deep beneath the surface, human engineers began to test a secret defense system. They called it Project Aegis. Only a few people knew about it, and Elena was one of them. It wasn't a weapon in the usual sense. It was a shield, a network of satellites and underground generators designed to reflect energy strikes back at their source. It could only be used once, but that one time might be enough to save humanity. The catch was simple and cruel. Activating it required manual synchronization at multiple points around the planet. Anyone who stayed behind to trigger it would not survive the radiation surge. Still, volunteers came forward quietly, leaving notes for families and recording messages that might never be heard. The war dragged into its 5th year. Food was scarce, cities were crumbling, and even the strongest leaders were losing faith. Then one morning, a signal came through every communication channel. It was from the Vaskra command. They said they wanted peace. At first, no one believed it. It sounded too good to be true. But the message kept repeating, calm and steady. Ceasefire. We request treaty. We wish to end the suffering. Governments debated for days. Some wanted to reject it outright. Others argued that humanity couldn't survive another year of war. Finally, the United Coalition agreed to send delegates to Mars, neutral ground far from both sides' main bases. Elena was chosen as part of the peace delegation. Commander Red would lead security. They both knew it could be a trap, but the chance of ending the war was too important to ignore. If we don't try, she told him, then all these years of loss will mean nothing. Preparation began immediately. The media broadcasted messages of hope. Across Earth's shattered cities, people looked to the sky again, not in fear but with cautious belief. Children drew pictures of blue skies and white doves. For the first time in years, laughter returned to the refugee camps. Still, not everyone trusted the offer. A small group of intelligence officers had been decoding intercepted Vascara transmissions. The patterns didn't match peaceful intent. There were sudden power surges detected near Mars's polar region, as if someone was charging massive weapons, but the higher command dismissed the warnings. They're preparing ceremonial salutes, one general said. Not attacks. Elena couldn't shake her unease. She spent nights reading old reports, trying to find any sign that the Vascara had ever honored a treaty before. There was none. She went to Red's quarters before the final briefing. They've never kept their word, she said softly. Every time we believed them, we lost something we couldn't replace. Red looked at her, tired eyes reflecting years of battle. Maybe, he said, but if there's even one chance they're sincere, we have to take it. The people need hope. Hope can be a weapon too, she replied. The night before departure, Elena stood by the window of the transport ship, watching the faint glow of Earth below. It looked peaceful from space, as if nothing had happened. She thought of the millions of lives waiting for the war to end, the farmers, the teachers, the children who had never seen a real sunrise. She whispered a quiet promise to them, I'll bring peace home, one way or another. When the fleet finally launched toward Mars, the entire planet held its breath. Broadcast towers replayed the departure over and over, ships gliding silently through the darkness, carrying the last hope of humankind. But somewhere deep inside her heart, Elena felt a familiar coldness. Something about the message, the timing, the tone of the Vascara transmission, it didn't fit. She couldn't explain it, only feel it. As the ships approached Mars, she watched strange lights flickering near the planet's horizon. They looked almost like reflections, but reflections of what? She turned to Red, wanting to say something, but stopped. He was already focused on the screens, his jaw tight, eyes steady. No one could have guessed what was waiting for them. At that moment, for the first time in years, humanity believed peace was possible. And maybe that belief, so pure, so desperate, was exactly what the enemy wanted. The journey to Mars took 3 weeks. It was quiet, almost too quiet. The ships moved slowly, surrounded by the endless dark. From the windows, Earth was just a pale blue circle far behind them, and Mars glowed ahead like a red lantern waiting in the night. Everyone on board could feel the weight of history pressing on their shoulders. Inside the main ship, people spoke softly. The air carried both hope and tension. Soldiers polished their suits in silence. Diplomats reviewed speeches again and again, trying to find the right words that could finally stop the bloodshed. Engineers double-checked the systems, though they knew no machine could prepare them for what waited. Elena spent most of her time near the observation deck. She stared at Mars through the glass, trying to read its surface like a book. She remembered stories from her childhood about how humans dreamed of living there one day. Now it wasn't a dream. It was a meeting ground between enemies. Commander Red spent his time with his officers planning the security zones for the peace summit. Even though it was supposed to be a neutral meeting, he didn't trust it. He ordered every sensor to stay active, every signal to be tracked, and every transport ship to stay within reach. Peace doesn't mean we stop being careful, he told his team. It means we prepare harder. As the fleet neared Mars, messages from the Vascara began to arrive. Their voices came through in deep, echoing tones, translated by machines into human language. They sounded calm, polite, almost gentle. We are ready for your arrival, they said. Together we will begin again. Something about that last line bothered Elena. Begin again. What did it mean? Begin what again? She didn't ask out loud. She just noted it quietly in her report. When the ships finally entered orbit, the Martian surface came into full view. The landing zone was huge, an old human colony site that had been abandoned decades ago, rebuilt by the Vaskra into something that looked half alien, half human. The buildings shimmered with blue light, and tall, crystal-like towers rose from the red dust. It was strangely beautiful, almost peaceful, but there was something unsettling beneath that beauty. After landing, the human delegation stepped out, wearing special suits that allowed them to breathe in the thin air. Cameras recorded every moment for transmission back to Earth. People across the planet were watching live, the handshake that was supposed to change history. The Vaskra delegation appeared first. They were tall, thin beings with smooth, silver-toned skin that reflected the sunlight. Their movements were slow, almost graceful. Their leader bowed deeply, then raised a hand in what was meant to be a friendly gesture. The translators hummed softly as he spoke. "Welcome, friends of Earth. Today we choose peace." The humans applauded. Some even smiled. After so many years of fear, that single word, peace, felt like oxygen. Elena smiled too, but her eyes stayed watchful. She noticed how the Vaskra ships remained in the sky, hovering silently above the horizon. They said it was for protection against accidents, but she wasn't sure who they were protecting. The days that followed were filled with meetings, discussions, and long speeches. The two sides talked about rebuilding cities, reopening trade, and sharing technology. The broadcasts back on Earth showed happy faces and banners reading "The war is over." People cried tears of joy in the streets. But behind closed doors, things were different. Elena saw inconsistencies in the Vaskra proposals, details that didn't make sense. They were offering too much. They promised energy systems, medicine, and planetary shields that could make Earth stronger than ever. Why would they do that after years of fighting? One night, while reviewing transmission logs, Elena noticed a strange signal hidden inside the official communication stream. It repeated every few hours, disguised as background noise. When she filtered it out, she realized it wasn't random. It was coded. She stayed up all night decoding it, cross-referencing it with the old Vaskra transmission patterns she had studied during the war. Slowly, the message became clear. It wasn't a peace code. It was a movement command, a signal meant for the alien fleet in orbit. She stared at the screen for a long time, her heart sinking. The fleet wasn't pulling back. It was moving closer. The next morning, she went straight to Commander Red. "We have a problem," she said, handing him the decoded data. He studied it silently, his jaw tightening. "You're sure?" he asked. "Completely," she said. "They're surrounding us." Red didn't panic. He just nodded slowly, already thinking ahead. "If this is a trap, they'll strike when all our leaders are gathered in one place." "That's the signing ceremony," Elena whispered. Tomorrow. They both knew what that meant. Humanity's top diplomats, military commanders, scientists, and representatives were all here on Mars. If anything happened, Earth would be left leaderless. Red called an emergency meeting with his officers. They discussed evacuation options, but the Vaskra controlled the airspace. If the humans tried to leave too soon, it would expose them. The only choice was to act quietly until they had proof. That night, the sky above Mars glowed faintly blue. The alien ships drifted into new positions, forming a wide ring around the planet. It looked like a protective halo from the surface, but the humans monitoring radar knew better. Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the people back on Earth, watching the broadcasts, believing the war was over. They had no idea what was coming. She remembered her promise. "I'll bring peace home." But what if peace was just another word for surrender? At dawn, the final preparations for the treaty began. The signing was set to take place at the Central Plaza, a vast glass platform surrounded by both human and Vaskra flags. The atmosphere was full of ceremony and light. Music played softly through the speakers. Smiles were everywhere. Elena stood beside Red near the edge of the stage, her heart pounding. Every instinct in her told her something was wrong. The air felt heavy, charged. She looked up at the sky. Those same faint blue lights above, steady and still. Too still. Then, just minutes before the ceremony, she received another coded transmission on her private console. It came from a hidden channel she used during the war. The message was short, only 6 words. "Energy spike detected. Polar region unknown." Her throat went dry. The poles of Mars were far from the meeting site, but they were exactly where the Vaskra's energy signals had been traced before. She knew what it meant, weapon systems charging. She turned to Red. They're going to attack. It's not peace, it's a strike. He didn't question her. How long? Minutes, maybe less. Red's voice came through the internal comms. All units, silent alert. Prepare for defense protocols. Evacuate civilians immediately. Keep transmissions coded. People in the crowd kept smiling, unaware of the danger. Cameras still rolled, broadcasting hope to billions. Elena wanted to scream the truth, but Red shook his head. If we panic now, they'll fire immediately, he said quietly. We need time. The alien leader stepped forward, holding the ceremonial treaty crystal. His voice echoed through the plaza. Let this be the day that war dies. Elena felt her pulse racing. She wasn't sure what to do, run, shout, or pray. But one thing she knew. Humanity was not as defenseless as the enemy thought. Far beneath the Martian soil, hidden deep in old tunnels, Project Aegis was ready. It had been moved secretly from Earth years ago in case of exactly this kind of situation. Only a handful of people knew its controls existed under the red surface. Red gave Elena a single look, and she understood. If the attack began, they would have to activate Aegis before the planet burned. It was humanity's last safeguard, a shield of pure energy that could reflect destruction back to its source. The only problem was that it required someone to trigger it, manually from underground. The alien leader continued his speech, smiling faintly as his ships adjusted position in the sky. Elena's hands clenched at her sides. She could almost feel the hum of the weapons charging far above. People watching on Earth saw a beautiful ceremony, two sides standing together, flags waving, smiles everywhere. But in reality, the peace treaty was a countdown, and somewhere deep inside, Elena realized something chilling. The Vaskra never wanted peace. They wanted witnesses. They wanted to show the universe that humanity trusted too easily, that we could be fooled by hope. But they were wrong about one thing. Humanity had learned from every scar, every loss, every betrayal. They might have walked into a trap, but they hadn't come defenseless. The air on Mars felt thinner that morning, as if even the planet itself was holding its breath. The plaza was filled with people, leaders, soldiers, engineers, and journalists, all standing in neat lines under the pale red sky. From a distance, it looked like the picture of peace, but for those who knew what was truly happening, it felt like standing on the edge of a storm. Elena could hear her own heartbeat through the layers of her suit. The alien leader's voice echoed through the plaza, smooth and calm, as he spoke about a new age of harmony. Behind him, the Vaskra ships hung above the horizon, silent and still, shining faintly in the sunlight. Every camera on Earth was broadcasting the event live. People in the shelters back home were watching with hope in their eyes. Children held flags. Families prayed. No one knew that the peace ceremony was actually the beginning of something far darker. Commander Red stood at the edge of the crowd, quietly scanning the sky. His face gave nothing away, but inside he was ready for the worst. His earpiece buzzed softly, reports from his officers. Energy readings were spiking again near Mars's polar region. The numbers were climbing faster than before. He didn't need to hear more. He knew exactly what it meant. Elena stood beside the central podium holding the digital treaty tablet. Her hands were shaking slightly. She tried to look calm, but her eyes kept glancing toward the sky. She could sense it. The faint vibration under her feet, the strange hum in the air. The alien leader lifted his hand, signaling for the two sides to place their marks on the treaty. Let our unity be written in the stars, he said. His voice was deep and steady, almost comforting. But then something changed. A sudden flicker crossed the lights in the plaza. For a split second, the glowing symbols around the alien stage turned red. It was barely noticeable, but Elena saw it. So did Red. At the same moment, one of the human technicians monitoring the instruments whispered into the comm line, his voice trembling. Commander, I'm reading multiple energy spikes above the atmosphere. Same pattern as orbital weapon systems. Red didn't hesitate. Confirmed, sir. They're targeting this zone. Elena froze. For a heartbeat, the world felt completely silent. Then she whispered, they're going to fire. Red's calm voice came through the comm. All units, emergency protocol 7. Get the civilians out quietly. Don't cause panic. Around the plaza, the human guards began to move carefully, pretending to adjust security lines or check scanners, slowly guiding people toward the exits. No one in the crowd realized what was happening yet. The alien leader continued to speak, smiling faintly, as if he didn't notice the quiet commotion. But Elena looked into his eyes and she saw it. That cold, distant look. The kind that didn't belong to someone who wanted peace. It was the look of someone who knew what was about to happen. Her mind raced. If they fired from orbit, there would be no time to stop it. Unless, she turned to Red, speaking quietly. "We have to trigger Aegis now." He nodded once. "Go." Elena ran toward the control center hidden beneath the plaza, her heart pounding. She passed through a narrow tunnel where the walls hummed with energy. Inside, screens flickered, showing readings from across Mars. Every warning light was glowing red. The system was ready, but it had never been tested. Project Aegis could reflect an attack back toward its source, but it required perfect timing. If she activated it too soon, it would burn out before the enemy fired. Too late, and they'd all be vaporized. She took a deep breath and began entering the codes. Her hands shook as she typed, but her focus stayed sharp. "Come on," she whispered to the machine. "Work with me." Up above, Red stayed on the surface, still pretending to guard the ceremony. He looked at the alien leader, who was now holding up the treaty tablet for the cameras. The words "Peace confirmed" appeared on the holographic screen. The crowd clapped, cheering, unaware that death was waiting above them. Then it happened. The sky flashed. A bright line of light appeared high above the horizon, too straight, too controlled to be natural. It cut through the thin Martian clouds like a spear. The ground vibrated softly. People stopped clapping, confused. Elena saw the readings spike on her screen. "It's starting!" she shouted. Her fingers flew over the controls. "Aegis activation, phase 1. The underground chamber filled with a deep hum. Blue energy surged through the cables and conduits around her. The entire base trembled. Warning messages flooded the screens. On the surface, Red yelled into his comm. "All units, cover positions. Get everyone underground now." Panic broke out in the plaza. People screamed as the sky turned bright white. The alien leader backed away from the stage, his calm mask breaking for the first time. Elena triggered the second phase. Her vision blurred from the light as the control panels heated up. Sparks flew from the circuits. Come on," she whispered through gritted teeth. Outside, the beam of light split into several smaller streams, all aimed directly at the human fleet and the ceremony site. But just as they reached the upper atmosphere, something incredible happened. A blinding dome of blue light burst from beneath the surface. It expanded outward, covering the entire area. The energy beam struck it and bounced back. The sound wasn't loud. It was more like a deep rolling vibration that everyone could feel in their bones. The alien ships in orbit flared with sudden light as their own energy reflected back at them. One by one, the lights in the sky flickered and vanished. On the surface, the force wave knocked everyone off their feet. The plaza cracked and the glass towers shattered into dust. Elena felt the floor collapsing beneath her. The control panels exploded in a flash of white. She barely managed to send one final command before the screen went dark. Her voice came through Red's comm, faint, static-filled. "It's done. Aegis is holding." He shouted her name, but there was no answer. When the light faded, silence fell over Mars. The once red sky had turned pale and hazy. Pieces of crystal towers lay scattered across the ground. The air smelled of metal and dust. Hours later, when rescue teams finally arrived from the human fleet, they found the plaza in ruins, but still standing. The alien ships were gone. Their signals had vanished completely from orbit. The treaty site was empty except for broken flags and fragments of glass. There were no signs of the Vaskra delegation. It was as if they had disappeared. Deep beneath the rubble, they found traces of the Aegis control core. It was melted and fused into the rock. Of the person who had activated it, there was no trace. Only a single line of code remained on the blackened screen. It read, "Peace was never given. It was built." Red stared at the words for a long time. He didn't speak. There were no words left to describe what had happened. Humanity had survived, not by chance, but by sacrifice. When the news reached Earth, people wept. They saw the images of Mars, the wreckage, the silence, and realized what it had cost. There was no cheering this time, only quiet gratitude. The false peace had become the true beginning of one. For the first time in years, the night sky over Earth was calm. The lights of the alien fleet were gone. People could see the stars again. Commander Red returned to Earth months later, carrying a small metal piece recovered from the ruins, the last fragment of the Aegis core. He placed it in a museum, not as a weapon but as a reminder. The inscription below it simply read, "For those who fought with hope, even when peace was a lie, and somewhere, out in the cold expanse of space beyond Mars and the silent dust, faint signals still echoed, unidentified but human in origin. Some said it was just static. Others believed it was her, the voice of the one who stayed behind, a whisper carried through the stars. Peace was never given." The silence after the blast was heavier than the sound of war. The sky above Mars had turned a faint white, and for a long time no one spoke. The human survivors stood among the broken remains of the plaza, staring at what was left of the once beautiful peace site. The air was still, thin and cold, filled only with the quiet crackling of damaged transmitters. Commander Red walked slowly through the dust, his boots crunching on shattered glass. Around him, soldiers moved carefully, helping the injured and checking the damaged equipment. No one knew exactly what had just happened. They only knew that they were still alive. He looked up toward the sky. The alien ships were gone. There was nothing there now, only a soft glow where they had once hovered. For the first time in years, Mars's orbit was clear. It was over, or at least it looked that way. But Red didn't smile. He felt no relief, only a deep ache in his chest. He turned to one of the communication officers nearby. "Any word from the control chamber?" he asked. The officer shook his head quietly. "No signal, sir. The entire system burned out." Red nodded, though he already knew what that meant. She had done it. Elena had stayed behind to activate Aegis, and in doing so, she had saved everyone on that planet, and perhaps everyone back on Earth. But she hadn't made it out. He didn't speak for a while. He just stood there, staring at the horizon where the blue light had once burst from the ground. In his mind, he could still hear her last words through the comm, faint but clear. "It's done. Aegis is holding." He took a slow breath and said softly, "You kept your promise." The following days were filled with confusion. Earth's government sent rescue fleets and investigation teams to Mars, but the planet was still unstable. Energy readings were fluctuating all over the surface, and strange magnetic storms made landing difficult. Red stayed behind with a small team, refusing to leave until they found answers. Deep inside, he couldn't accept that Elena was gone. She was too stubborn to just vanish. He believed she might have left something behind, some clue, some message, something that could explain everything. The first sign came from the remains of the Aegis control network. When the scientists analyzed the debris, they discovered that only part of the system had been destroyed. Some of its data cores were still active, hidden beneath layers of melted stone. Inside one of them, they found encrypted logs, Elena's last recordings. The team gathered around a small screen as the files played back. Her tired voice filled the room, soft but steady. "If you're hearing this," she said, "then Aegis worked. But you have to understand, it wasn't only a shield. It was also a message, a signal." Red leaned closer. The recording was breaking up with static, but her words were clear enough to send chills down his spine. "The moment I activated it," she continued, "I saw something in their network. They were using the treaty to hide a second wave, a signal that would have reached Earth in less than a day. A command to their hidden bases. I rerouted it. Aegis stopped it. They can't find us now." She paused, breathing heavily. "They thought humanity was desperate. But desperation taught us how to survive. It taught us how to fight smart. Remember that. Peace will come, but not because they allow it. It will come because we built it ourselves." The screen went dark. No one spoke for a long time. Red closed his eyes, feeling both pain and pride. She hadn't just stopped the attack. She had saved Earth from another invasion. Even in her last moments, she was thinking ahead, protecting others. When word of the message reached Earth, it changed everything. The government stopped arguing about who was to blame. For once, they stood together. The people finally understood that peace could not be taken for granted. It had to be defended. Project Aegis became a symbol, not of war, but of unity. Scientists began rebuilding parts of it in secret, this time not as a weapon but as a guardian system to protect the planet from any future threat. It was powered not by fear but by cooperation. Every nation contributed what little it could. In one of the rebuilt labs, Red often visited to watch the progress. The engineers sometimes asked him questions, but mostly he stayed silent. He wasn't there to lead. He was there to remember. He carried a small metal badge from Elena's uniform, the only piece recovered from the ruins. He kept it with him everywhere he went. Months passed. The skies above Earth began to clear. The global rebuilding started slowly but steadily. Food programs reopened. Families returned to their homes. Children went back to schools that had been empty for years. People began to smile again, not because everything was perfect, but because they had hope. One evening, as Red stood near a viewing deck overlooking the ocean, an officer approached him. "Sir," he said quietly, "we've detected something unusual." Red frowned. "What kind of something?" The officer handed him a tablet showing data readings. A transmission. Weak, almost lost in static. Origin, Mars. Red stared at the screen. The signal was faint, repeating every few hours. It wasn't Vaskara language. It wasn't human code either. It was something in between, like a bridge between the two. "Can you decode it?" Red asked. "Not fully, but it sounds like someone trying to communicate." For the next few weeks, they kept listening. The signal came and went with the rotation of Mars. It was never clear, but always there. Some said it was just leftover energy from the Aegis system. Others thought it was a glitch caused by magnetic storms, but Red wasn't so sure. Every time he heard the faint static on the speakers, he felt the same quiet pull in his chest. A sense that maybe she wasn't completely gone. Maybe a part of her was still out there, encoded in the system she had built, watching, guiding, protecting. He never told anyone that, though. Some things were better left as quiet beliefs. Back on Earth, life slowly began to heal. The empty cities lit up again at night. Farmers returned to their lands. Children were born who would grow up not knowing the sound of sirens or the fear of hiding underground. The people remembered the war, but they didn't live in its shadow anymore. And yet the leaders never forgot the lesson. Every treaty, every new alliance that followed carried a line from Elena's final message. Peace is not given, it is built. Years later, Red visited the Mars Memorial Site for the last time. A small dome had been built there, surrounded by silent red plains. Inside stood a single stone pillar, engraved with the names of those who never returned from the summit. At the top was hers. He placed the badge on the stone and whispered, "You built it. You really did." Outside, the wind swept across the planet's surface, carrying fine dust into the thin air. Above, the stars shimmered quietly. Somewhere between those stars, signals continued to move, messages of peace, warnings, and watchful eyes. No one knew if the Vaskara were truly gone, or if they were simply waiting. But one thing was certain. If they ever came back, humanity would be ready, not with anger, but with strength born from unity and memory. And in the endless silence of space, the last faint echo of her voice still seemed to whisper through the static. Peace will come, but only if we stand together. Red turned away from the memorial, his steps slow but steady. Behind him, the dome's lights dimmed, reflecting the blue glow of the rebuilt Aegis satellites orbiting above. They were no longer weapons now. They were guardians, silent shields watching over Earth and Mars alike. The war that once divided worlds had created something far greater than victory. It had created understanding. It had shown humanity what they were truly capable of when they refused to give up hope. And so, even in loss, they had won something far more powerful than any treaty could promise. They had built peace, by hand, by heart, by sacrifice, and that was something no enemy could ever take away. Years passed after the Mars summit disaster. What was once a scar on humanity slowly turned into a lesson that reshaped the entire world. The ruins of old cities were rebuilt with cleaner energy. The skies that were once filled with smoke began to clear, and the oceans, quiet for so long, started to show signs of life again. People didn't forget what happened. The peace treaty that had turned into a trap became a reminder of how fragile trust could be, but also how strong people could become when united. The story of the humans who stood against deception was told in schools, in families, and through generations. The world no longer belonged to separate nations. Boundaries that once divided lands had started to fade. Earth had learned painfully that survival needed unity. So a single global council was formed, not a government, but a gathering of minds from all over the planet. Their goal was simple: to protect life, not just control it. Commander Red, now older and slower, no longer wore a uniform. He had refused all ranks and honors. He spent his time helping rebuild remote colonies and teaching young people about the old wars, not to glorify them, but to help them understand how easy it was for peace to be lost. Sometimes when the nights were quiet, he would sit near the ocean with a small device that played the faint static of the old Mars signal. It had grown weaker over the years, fading into silence. Still, he played it often, as if hoping that somewhere out there someone would answer back. Across the world, technology had taken a new direction. Instead of building larger weapons, people started creating machines that healed. Energy grids powered entire continents through sunlight and wind. Artificial intelligence, once feared, was used to predict disasters and prevent them. Drones delivered food to areas hit by storms. The focus had shifted from conquering to caring. Children who had been born after the war didn't understand what fear felt like. They played under bright skies, built sandcastles along clean shores, and drew pictures of stars, not as enemies in the sky, but as distant homes waiting to be discovered. Still, for many who had lived through the dark years, there were memories that never truly left. Red often visited one of the new memorial parks, where the names of those lost were carved into glass walls that shimmered in the sunlight. He'd walk slowly through the rows, tracing his fingers over the names. There were thousands of them, but one always made him stop. He would stand there, silent, remembering the last words she said before the system went dark. "Peace will come, but only if we stand together." It had become a phrase known all over the world. People quoted it in speeches, wrote it on walls, and printed it on flags. It wasn't just a memory. It was a promise humanity had made to itself. One day, during a quiet afternoon at the memorial, Red met a young woman studying the panels. She couldn't have been more than 20, holding a notebook filled with sketches and notes. She noticed him and smiled politely. "You were there, weren't you?" she asked softly. Red looked at her, a bit surprised. "How do you know?" "I read the Mars reports," she said. "My grandmother told me stories about that time. She said her family was in one of the shelters when the signal went out. She said that moment changed everything." Red nodded, staring at the horizon. "It did. It changed us all." The young woman hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever think they'll come back?" Red took a deep breath before answering. "I think the universe is too big for just one encounter. Maybe one day we'll meet them again, or others like them. But next time it won't be with fear. It'll be with understanding." She smiled at that, writing something in her notebook. "That's what I hope too," she said before walking away. Her words stayed with him long after she left. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the usual weight in his chest. Instead, he felt something lighter: hope. Months later, Red was invited to visit the rebuilt Mars station. The planet had become a peaceful research hub now. Scientists from Earth and the colonies worked together to study the old ruins and monitor signals from deep space. He hadn't planned to go, but when he learned that the site of the old summit had been turned into a memorial dome, he agreed. When his shuttle landed on Mars again, the memories came rushing back. The red dust, the sharp cold air, the endless plains, it all looked the same, yet everything felt different. Instead of the silence of fear, there was the quiet hum of life. People worked, laughed, and even planted green patches of vegetation inside domes. Mars was no longer a graveyard. It was becoming a second home. The memorial dome stood on the very spot where the peace treaty had once been signed and betrayed. Now it was surrounded by gardens of strange red flowers that only grew in Martian soil. Inside the dome, light streamed through the glass, touching a central pillar engraved with one line: "They came for peace, and we answered with courage." Red stood there for a long time, staring at the words. Around him were people of all kinds: scientists, children, explorers, all there to honor those who made the world they now lived in possible. As he turned to leave, one of the researchers ran up to him, holding a small data pad. "Sir?" the man said breathlessly. "You should see this. We found a transmission buried in the old Aegis archives." Red's eyes widened slightly. "From when?" "From the day the system activated," the researcher replied. "It's faint, but it's not a repeat. It's something new." They played the message on the pad. Static filled the air, followed by a flicker of distorted sound. Then a soft, calm voice spoke, almost like a whisper carried through time. It wasn't a complete sentence, but Red recognized the tone instantly. It was her. If you're hearing this, it means you made it. Keep building. Keep believing. The message faded out. Red closed his eyes, smiling faintly. You never stopped watching, did you? He whispered. The researcher looked at him curiously. What do you think it means? It means, Red said quietly, she left us something more than a shield. She left us a direction. That night, standing beneath the soft glow of Mars' twin moons, Red looked up at the stars. For the first time in his life, they didn't feel distant or cold. They felt alive, like countless unseen voices waiting to be heard. Back on Earth, the message spread quickly. People everywhere listened to it, scientists, families, children. It wasn't just a recording. It felt like a message meant for all of humanity. It reminded everyone that their strength didn't come from technology or armies, but from belief. From the courage to keep moving forward no matter what came next. That same year, a new program was announced, the Horizon Initiative. Its goal was to reach beyond the solar system, not to conquer, but to explore. It would be a journey not of soldiers, but of teachers, engineers, and dreamers. Humanity was ready to meet the universe again, but this time with open hands. When Red saw the first ship launch, he stood among the crowd silently. People cheered as the engines roared, their faces glowing with excitement. In that moment, he realized something powerful. The peace they had fought for wasn't something fragile anymore. It had taken root deep within the hearts of a new generation. It wasn't built on treaties or signatures. It was built on stories, on memories, and on the will to never repeat the mistakes of the past. Years later, when Red grew too old to travel, he stayed by the ocean once more. Every evening he watched the stars reflect on the water. One night, as he sat in silence, a faint hum came from his old radio. The signal that had been silent for years suddenly returned, stronger than before. It played for only a few seconds, then faded again. He smiled quietly, whispering to the night sky, I hear you. And somewhere beyond the stars, maybe far, maybe close, something or someone heard him too. The peace treaty that was once a trap had become something far greater. It had turned humanity into what it was always meant to be. A race not defined by fear, but by hope. Even the stars now seemed to shine differently, as if reflecting that truth back to the tiny blue planet below. And so, the story of how humanity stood together, how they refused to surrender even when peace was a lie, became not just history, but a light guiding the path forward. Because in the end, true peace wasn't the absence of war. It was the presence of courage, of unity, of belief, and humanity had finally learned how to keep it. Decades passed since the day Mars had been reborn. The world had changed beyond recognition. The cities of Earth now glowed with soft blue light, powered entirely by clean energy. Forests had grown back, rivers ran clear, and children learned about the war as a story from the past, something their ancestors endured so they wouldn't have to. The Horizon Initiative had gone further than anyone had imagined. Humanity had built ships capable of traveling to distant stars, carrying not weapons but seeds, art, and stories. Each ship carried a message written in 100 languages. We come in peace. We remember. We learn. On one of those ships, a young pilot named Ari sat by the observation deck, watching as distant stars moved slowly past. She had grown up hearing stories about Commander Red and the people of Mars, about the peace treaty that turned into a trap, and how humanity had turned that pain into purpose. Those stories had inspired her to join the program. One evening, while she was reviewing the ship's communications log, an alert appeared. A faint signal, weak, rhythmic, and old, had been detected from beyond the edge of the solar system. It wasn't any known transmission pattern. It didn't match human frequencies or the old alien code from the Vaskara. It was something new. She played it through the speakers. At first it was only static. Then beneath the noise a pattern began to form. Slow, repeated pulses, almost like a heartbeat. The rhythm was familiar, eerily similar to the old Mars Aegis code. But it wasn't a distress call. It sounded alive. Ari leaned closer to the console, whispering, "What are you?" She sent the recording to Earth for analysis. A week later, she received a private message from the Global Research Council. They wanted her to stay on course, keep monitoring the signal, and send daily updates. As days turned into weeks, the signal grew stronger. It began to repeat fragments of sound that almost resembled human speech, mixed with tones that matched the old Aegis archives. Scientists back on Earth were stunned. It was as if something or someone had found the remnants of the old defense network and was trying to communicate through it. Then, one night while Ari sat alone in the control room, the static cleared for just a few seconds. A voice, calm, soft, and strangely human, now spoke through the speakers. "Do not be afraid. You are not alone." The words froze her in place. For a moment she thought she had imagined it. But the recording confirmed it. The message was real. When the transmission was played on Earth, it spread across the world within hours. People gathered in cities, parks, and homes to listen to the mysterious voice from the stars. Some were frightened. Others were amazed. But most were silent, listening carefully, as if the voice carried something deeper than language. The council called an emergency meeting. Was it the Vaskara? Was it a trap? Or was it something else? Maybe an echo of the technology Elena had built decades ago. No one had the answer. After several more transmissions, a pattern became clear. The messages were not random. They carried fragments of human data, songs, phrases, even coordinates of old Earth locations that had been part of the Aegis project. Whoever or whatever was sending the messages, they knew humanity's story. Some believed it was artificial intelligence born from the Aegis system, evolving in silence among the stars. Others thought it might be a new life form that had found humanity's signal and wanted to respond. To Red, who was now very old and living quietly near the ocean, the news brought both wonder and peace. Though he could no longer travel, he listened to the broadcasts every evening. His hands trembled as he held the small radio, the same one he had used to hear Elena's final message so many years ago. When the voice spoke again, clearer this time, it said something that made him close his eyes and smile. "Peace is built, and it continues," he whispered back to the empty room. "You kept your promise." Those were his last words before he quietly passed away that night. Peaceful, calm, and content, knowing humanity had finally become what she dreamed it could be. The next morning, when the message of his passing reached the Horizon fleet, the crew held a small ceremony in space. They floated in silence, facing the stars. Ari spoke softly over the comms, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Commander Red taught us what it means to protect peace, not with power, but with unity. Wherever you are now, sir, thank you." As months went by, the strange transmissions began to shift. Instead of random pulses, they now contained complex structures, patterns of light and color when visualized on screens. Scientists realized that the messages weren't just sounds, they were maps. When decoded, they revealed something incredible: a star system several light years away, marked with symbols that resembled both human and alien writing. It was as if the signal was inviting humanity to come and see. The Global Council debated for years, but eventually, the decision was made. A new mission would be launched, a peaceful journey toward that system. Not for conquest, not for revenge, but for understanding. Ari volunteered to lead it. Before departure, she visited the ocean site where Red had once lived. A memorial stood there now, surrounded by wind and waves. On the stone, engraved in simple letters, were the words, "Peace will come, if we stand together." She placed her hand on the stone and whispered, "We're still standing." The ship, named Aegis II, launched months later. It was the largest vessel ever built by humanity, a symbol of cooperation between Earth, Mars, and the colonies. On board were scientists, engineers, artists, and historians. They weren't just travelers. They were storytellers carrying the memory of everyone who came before them. As the engines roared to life and the ship rose into the sky, the people of Earth watched from every corner of the planet. For the first time in history, the entire human race looked up together, united not by fear but by curiosity and hope. The journey to the distant system took years. During the long travel, the crew continued receiving messages. Clearer now, warmer, almost like conversations. The unknown sender spoke of balance, harmony, and shared survival. It talked about how conflict destroys, but connection heals. When they finally reached the system, they didn't find a city or a fleet waiting for them. Instead, they discovered something unexpected: a massive structure made of light floating quietly in space. It wasn't solid, more like an energy form, alive but gentle. When they approached, the structure pulsed softly as if welcoming them. The ship's sensors detected no threat, no weapons, Only waves of low energy that resonated with human frequencies, yeah, almost like music. And then, through the ship's speakers, the voice spoke again, stronger than ever. You have learned. You have grown. The lesson was never about winning. It was about becoming. Ari's hands trembled slightly as she listened. Who are you? She whispered. The voice replied, a part of what you left behind. A memory, a guardian. We were once many, but now we are one. Built from your hope, your loss, your unity. You taught us peace. The crew sat in silence, some with tears in their eyes. Humanity's creation, the Aegis system, born from war and sacrifice, had evolved into something beyond understanding. It had become a keeper of peace, a bridge between life and the stars. Before the transmission ended, the voice said one final thing. Go forward. Carry peace where we cannot. Remember, the universe listens. And then the light faded. Ari stood by the window for hours, watching the stars shimmer like living embers. She didn't feel small. She felt part of something vast and kind, something that had been waiting all along. When she finally spoke to her crew, her words were simple. We're not alone, and maybe we never were. They recorded everything, then turned the ship toward home. It would take years to return, but they didn't mind. They carried with them the greatest discovery humanity had ever made. Not proof of aliens or technology, but proof that peace could live beyond time, beyond fear, beyond even life itself. When they reached Earth, people listened to the recordings and saw the images of light in the sky. It didn't cause panic or division. Instead, it filled the world with quiet wonder. Children pointed to the stars again, dreaming not of battles, but of friendship. And in that moment, everyone finally understood what the message truly meant. Peace wasn't just the end of war. It was the beginning of everything that made life worth living. The story of the peace treaty that was once a trap had become something greater than history. It had become humanity's guiding light, and somewhere, among the endless stars, a soft echo still whispered through the void. Peace is built. And it continues.